The red friend on sunny meadows. The morning sun, still gentle, painted the dew-kissed fields in shades of gold and emerald. Lily, her worn denim overalls streaked with last week's mud and yesterday's grease, hummed a tuneless melody as she carried a bucket of feed towards the chicken coop. Her grandmother, Rose, a spry woman with a laugh line for every year of her life, sat on the porch swing, shelling peas into a metal bowl. The rhythmic thunk-thunk of the pods hitting the bottom was the only counterpoint to Lily's song. "You're up with the larks again, my dear," Rose called out, her voice raspy from years of calling cows home. Lily grinned, a flash of white against her sun-kissed face. "Someone's got to tell the larks what to do, Grandma." She winked, then ducked into the coop, emerging a few minutes later with a basket full of warm, speckled eggs. The air smelled of damp earth, blooming honeysuckle, and the faint, comforting scent of hay. It was the smell of home, of sunny meadows, a small patch of land nestled between rolling hills and a whispering creek where life moved at the pace of the seasons. After a breakfast of scrambled eggs, thick-cut bacon, and Rose's legendary buttermilk biscuits, Lily headed for the barn. Her heart gave a familiar little thump of anticipation. There, nestled amongst tools and bags of seed, sat her pride and joy. A 1962 Farmall tractor, its faded red paint, chipped in places to reveal patches of primer, still gleamed under the barn light. The iconic H on its side, though worn, was a beacon. She called him Rusty, a testament to his age and a term of endearment. Rusty wasn't just a machine. He was a silent partner, a trusted confidant. He'd seen her through tearful teenage heartbreaks, celebrated bumper harvests, and patiently endured her early fumbling attempts at plowing straight rows. He was the sturdy backbone of their small operation, a testament to simpler times and enduring craftsmanship. Lily ran a hand along his cool metal fender, a gesture as natural as stroking a beloved pet. "All right, old friend," she murmured, her voice soft. "Big day today. That back 40 isn't going to turn itself over." She checked the oil, the fuel, the tire pressure, her movements practiced and efficient. Every bolt, every lever, every gauge was familiar territory. She climbed into the driver's seat, the worn leather a perfect mold to her frame. The scent of diesel and old grease was a comforting perfume. She turned the key, feeling the satisfying clunk as the ignition engaged. The engine coughed once, a robust, familiar rumble that vibrated through the chassis and up into her very bones. "That's my boy," she whispered, patting the steering wheel. The day unfolded in a rhythmic dance between girl and machine. The plow, attached with practiced ease, bit into the rich, dark earth, turning over neat furrows that steamed gently in the morning air. The roar of the engine was a constant, powerful companion, a symphony of purpose. Lily guided Rusty with an almost innate sense, feeling the subtle shifts in the soil, the pull of the plow. She watched the land transform, from a field of stubble to a canvas of dark, fertile lines, ready for new life. She paused mid-morning, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of a gloved hand. Rusty idled contentedly, the exhaust smelling faintly of burnt oil, a smell that always brought a smile to her face. She pulled a thermos from her lunch pail, pouring herself a cup of lukewarm coffee. The sun was higher now, its warmth seeping into her muscles, a pleasant ache. Dragonflies zipped and hovered over the newly turned earth, a tiny aerial ballet. Hours later, as the sun began its slow descent, painting the western sky in hues of orange and purple, Lily brought Rusty back towards the barn. They'd done good work. Nearly half the back 40 was ready. Her arms ached, her back was stiff, but a deep sense of satisfaction hummed beneath the fatigue. She pulled Rusty into his usual spot, the faint smell of hot metal mingling with the scent of freshly turned earth. She dismounted, stretching her weary limbs. "Good job today, old boy," she said, giving his hood a gentle pat. "Time for a rest." She decided to move him a little further back into the barn, away from the evening damp. Climbing back into the seat, she turned the key. Nothing. A cold knot of dread tightened in her stomach. She tried again, a little more force, a little more hope. The key turned, the dash lights flickered weakly, but the engine remained stubbornly silent. No cough, no rumble, not even a click. Just a profound, unsettling quiet. Lily felt a sudden, sharp pang of alarm. Rusty had always been dependable, a true workhorse. He'd grumbled sometimes, sure, but he'd never just quit. Not like this. She tried again, pumping the clutch, jiggling the gear shift, a frantic dance born of sudden anxiety. Still nothing. The silence in the barn felt heavy, suffocating. The earlier contentment drained away, replaced by a growing unease. She got off the tractor, her legs feeling strangely weak. She opened the hood, peering at the engine, though she knew little about what she was looking for in the tangle of wires and pipes. It all looked normal. But it wasn't. A cold dread began to creep through her, a premonition of something truly wrong. Her red friend, her loyal companion, lay lifeless. The thought brought a prickle of tears to her eyes. She put a hand on his cool engine block, a silent plea. "Come on, Rusty," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Please." Not now. The tractor remained motionless, a silent crimson monument to her sudden despair. The quiet was deafening. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, mournful shadows across the barn floor. A trip to the shiny dealership. The silence from Rusty was a physical weight, pressing down on Lily's chest, making it hard to breathe. Rose's hand, warm and firm, rested on her shoulder, a small comfort against the rising tide of panic. "It's all right, dear," Rose said, her voice surprisingly steady. "We'll figure this out. It's not the end of the world." Lily shook her head, the words catching in her throat. But it just stopped, no warning. And now, nothing. She gestured helplessly at the inert machine, its usually robust form now seeming fragile, vulnerable. "Well, we can't fix it standing here in the dark," Rose declared, a practical edge to her tone that cut through Lily's despair. "And your grandpa, bless his soul, wasn't one for newfangled engine diagnostics. But I heard tell of that new place, down by the crossroads, the John Deere dealership." Lily's head snapped up. The shiny one? She'd seen it, of course, a beacon of polished green and yellow, all glass and chrome, a stark contrast to the weathered red of Rusty and the humble familiarity of their farm. It had always seemed a world apart, a place for those with endless acreage and even deeper pockets. Rose nodded. "That's the one. They'll have mechanics there, I reckon. Tools we don't even know exist. Maybe they can shed some light on what's ailing our old friend." The idea, initially startling, began to take root. Desperation was a powerful motivator, and the thought of Rusty being irrevocably broken was a fear Lily couldn't bear. "But it's a Farmall," she finally managed, the unspoken question hanging in the air. Would a John Deere dealership even touch a competing brand, let alone one as ancient as Rusty? Rose merely smiled, a knowing glint in her eyes. "A good mechanic fixes engines, not just badges, Lily. Besides, it's worth a try. What have we got to lose?" The next morning, the sun seemed to mock Lily's anxiety, casting long, cheerful shadows across the yard as they climbed into Rose's old pickup truck. The drive to the dealership felt interminable. Each bump in the road, each passing field, seemed to remind Lily of Rusty's silent absence. When they finally arrived, the John Deere dealership was even more imposing than she remembered. It was a cathedral of modernity, bathed in a cool, artificial light that made everything gleam. Massive tractors, their tires taller than Lily, stood on pedestals, their green paint shimmering under the fluorescent glow. Combines, vast and intricate, looked like metallic beasts ready to devour entire fields in a single gulp. The air hummed with the quiet thrum of unseen machinery, a stark contrast to the familiar scent of earth and oil back home. Lily felt a prickle of unease. She was used to the honest grime of a working farm, the smell of diesel and cut grass. Here, everything was pristine, almost sterile. Her worn jeans and simple flannel shirt suddenly felt terribly out of place. As they stepped inside, a man emerged from an office, his smile a practiced, almost too bright affair. He was impeccably dressed in a crisp polo shirt adorned with the John Deere logo, his hair neatly combed. "Welcome to Green Acres Equipment," he boomed, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. He looked past Rose, his gaze lingering on the new models, before finally settling on Lily with a faint air of dismissal. "And what can I do for you ladies today? Looking to upgrade your fleet?" Rose, ever direct, stepped forward. "Good morning. My granddaughter here, Lily, has a problem with her tractor. A 1962 Farmall it is. Just stopped dead yesterday. The man's smile faltered, replaced by a subtle shift in his expression, a flicker of something that looked suspiciously like condescension. He smoothed a hand over his hair. A 1962 Farmall, you say? His tone made the word sound like an ancient forgotten curse. His eyes, though, were fixed on Lily, scanning her from her practical boots to her slightly disheveled ponytail. He chuckled, a short, dry sound that grated on Lily's nerves. Well now, a vintage model, is it? We mostly deal in newer technology here, state of the art, but I suppose we could take a look, though I wouldn't get your hopes up. He paused, then added, his voice dripping with an almost imperceptible hint of disdain. You're just a farm girl, right? Probably just needs a bit of tinkering. Lily felt a hot flush creep up her neck. The words stung, cutting deeper than he could possibly know. Just a farm girl. She was a farmer, yes, but that implied knowledge, strength, and an intimate connection to the land that he, with his polished shoes and gleaming showroom, clearly couldn't begin to comprehend. Her hands, calloused and strong, tightened into fists at her sides. She might be just a farm girl, but she knew the heart of her land better than anyone. And she knew Rusty. And Rusty was more than a bit of tinkering. Rose, however, merely raised an eyebrow, a silent challenge in her gaze. Mr. Green, he supplied, puffing out his chest slightly. Mr. Green, Rose repeated, her voice deceptively soft. This just a farm girl knows more about engines than most men I've met, and her tractor is more than just a bit of tinkering. It's the heart of our farm, so if you're able to help, we'd be most grateful. If not, we won't waste any more of your precious time. Her words, though polite, carried an undeniable steel. Mr. Green, momentarily taken aback by Rose's unexpected sharpness, cleared his throat. Right. Well, let's see what we can do then. Follow me, ladies. We'll get someone to take a look. He turned, leading them deeper into the dealership, past the rows of impossibly perfect machines, leaving Lily with the stinging echo of his condescending words and a renewed resolve. Just a farm girl, indeed. He had no idea. The $90,000 combine showroom fluorescence flared, polishing the chrome and forest green enamel of the machinery to a blinding, sterile sheen. Rose, unyielding, had secured a mechanic's assessment, yet Mr. Green, undeterred by her earlier rebuke, clearly harbored a different agenda. He clapped his hands, a sharp sound piercing the cavernous space. Now, while we await young Travis, allow me to unveil the future of agriculture. His voice resonated, bouncing off the high ceilings. He swept an arm towards a colossal combine dominating the showroom's heart, its sheer scale breathtaking. This harvesting leviathan, clad in John Deere's signature green and yellow, boasted tires taller than Lily, and a header, a complex sprawl of rotating blades and conveyors, stretched like the wingspan of some mechanical dragon. A prickle of unease snaked through Lily. Her cherished 1962 Farmall, Rusty, suddenly felt impossibly diminutive, a quaint relic from a bygone era. Amidst these gleaming titans, her tractor truly appeared a mere plaything. Mr. Green, a predatory grin plastered across his features, practically preened beside the behemoth. This, ladies, he announced, gesturing grandly, is the X9 1100, $90,000 of pure, unadulterated efficiency. He patted a massive, resilient tire. Autonomous steering, AI-powered yield mapping, climate-controlled cab. It practically pilots itself. No more sweltering in a dusty field, eh, miss? He winked at Lily, a patronizing glint in his eye. Lily's stomach tightened, a familiar flush of frustration warming her cheeks. She shifted, acutely aware of her worn jeans and muddy boots against the showroom's pristine floor. This man was alienating her in her own world. Compare that, Mr. Green continued, his voice dripping with thinly veiled disdain. To what you brought in, a little red trinket. He chuckled, a dry, mirthless sound that grated on Lily's nerves. Does that old thing even have a cab? Or power steering? He shook his head in mock pity, his gaze sweeping over her, lingering on a grease stain on her sleeve. I imagine you spend more time hand-cranking it than actually harvesting. Lily's hands clenched into fists. The anxiety over Rusty's breakdown, already a heavy burden, now sharpened into simmering resentment. "Rusty isn't a trinket," she said, her voice low but resolute. "He's a workhorse. He's been in our family for generations. He's never failed us until now." Mr. Green merely waved a dismissive hand. "Nostalgia is charming, my dear, but it doesn't fill the larder. This," he declared, slapping the combine's flank with an almost reverent hand, "this is what sustains America. Efficiency, speed, minimal effort. You could clear your entire 20 acres in, a single afternoon with this marvel." Lily inhaled deeply, striving for composure. She needed to clarify. She needed them to grasp the unusual circumstances. "The issue isn't Rusty's age, Mr. Green. It's a very specific problem. The engine just died. No warning. And then, when I tried to restart him, there was this strange shimmer." She attempted to describe the fleeting, almost ethereal glow she'd witnessed, the way the air had seemed to ripple around the engine block. Mr. Green threw his head back and guffawed. The loud, booming sound reverberated through the showroom, drawing the attention of a passing technician who quickly averted his gaze. "A shimmer?" he repeated, wiping a tear from his eye. "Oh, that's a novel one. Perhaps your trinket has developed a theatrical flair. Or perhaps," he added, regaining a semblance of control, "it's simply time to pension off the old girl. Send her to the scrap heap and invest in something that actually performs." He gestured again at the combine, his eyes gleaming with the prospect of a sale. "You require something dependable, something that won't leave you stranded. We have excellent financing options, you know." A wave of despair washed over Lily. It wasn't just the patronizing tone or the dismissal of her beloved tractor. It was the absolute lack of comprehension, the refusal to even consider the possibility of an extraordinary problem. She had sought to articulate the inexplicable, the magical quality of the breakdown, and he had simply laughed. Rose, silently observing the exchange, stepped forward, her gaze unwavering. "Mr. Green," she stated, her voice cutting through the lingering echoes of his laughter, "my granddaughter is attempting to explain a mechanical issue, not narrate a bedtime story, and our interest lies in repairing the tractor we own, not purchasing a combine that costs more than my entire farm." Her voice was quiet, but it held a steel that made Mr. Green's smile falter. "Now, about that mechanic?" A whisper of hope. "With all due respect, Mr. Green," Grandma Rose interjected, her voice cutting through the clatter of the showroom with an unexpected sharpness, "that trinket has been the backbone of our farm for generations. It's not just a machine, it's part of our family. We pour our sweat and our heart into keeping it running, because it's a connection to everything we've built." She placed a hand on Lily's shoulder, a silent reassurance that anchored Lily's swirling anxiety. "We're not looking to replace history, we're looking to fix it. Now, are we going to see a mechanic or not?" Mr. Green, momentarily flustered, cleared his throat. Of course, ladies. Right this way. Jedediah," he bellowed, his voice echoing across the vast space, punctuated by the metallic clang of a wrench dropping somewhere in the back. "We have a special case for you." The way he emphasized special made Lily's cheeks burn. She could feel the grimy dust of the farm still clinging to her clothes, a stark contrast to the polished chrome and gleaming paint of the new machinery surrounding them. Her worn boots felt impossibly heavy on the pristine concrete floor. As they navigated a labyrinth of towering green combines and tractors, each one larger and more intimidating than the last, Lily caught a glimpse of their reflection in a tinted window. Her hair, usually neatly tied back, had escaped its braid in several places, framing a face smudged with grease and worry. The dark circles under her eyes seemed to deepen with every dismissive glance Mr. Green cast their way. Despair, cold and sharp, began to prickle at her, threatening to overwhelm her resolve. Rusty wasn't just a machine. He was their livelihood, their heritage. To have him dismissed so readily felt like a personal insult. They reached a partitioned-off section, a more utilitarian space that smelled of oil and metal. A man, his back to them, was hunched over an engine, his gray hair thinning at the crown but still thick around the ears. He wore faded overalls, stained in a way that spoke of years of honest work, not careless spills. Jedediah, these ladies have a vintage tractor that needs a look-see, Mr. Green announced, his tone dripping with thinly veiled condescension. Apparently, it has a rather unique issue. He winked at Lily, a gesture that only intensified her frustration. She clenched her jaw, biting back a sharp retort. She didn't need his patronizing humor. She needed answers. The mechanic, Mr. Jed, slowly straightened up, his movements deliberate. He turned, revealing kind, crinkled eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wasn't as young as the other mechanics Lily had seen bustling around, nor as stern. There was a quiet strength in his posture, a deep-seated patience that immediately put Lily a little more at ease. He glanced from Mr. Green's smirking face to Lily's anxious one, then to Grandma Rose, whose expression was a mixture of defiance and quiet concern. "A vintage Farmall, you say?" Mr. Jed's voice was a low rumble, surprisingly gentle. His gaze lingered on Lily for a moment, and she felt an odd sense of being truly seen, not just evaluated. Lily nodded, her voice tight. "It's a 1962. It just stopped. No sputtering, no smoke, just like a switch was flipped. And the fuel gauge, it went from full to empty in an instant, even though I know the tank was topped up." She braced herself for Mr. Jed to echo Mr. Green's dismissive attitude, but he merely listened, his brow furrowed in thought. Mr. Green, however, couldn't resist. "See? Theatrical flair. These old machines, they just give up the ghost. Best to put her out to pasture, ladies, and look at something with a bit more modern reliability." He gestured vaguely towards the showroom. Mr. Jed's eyes flickered to Mr. Green, a flash of something unreadable passing through them before he turned back to Lily. A sudden stop, full to empty gauge. Interesting. He paused, then leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Look, I can't promise anything here, not with these newfangled diagnostic tools they make us use for everything. But there's an old trick, a whisper really, for those 62 Farmalls when they do something peculiar like that, something they don't teach in the manuals anymore." He straightened up, his gaze sweeping the showroom as if checking for eavesdroppers. "Tell you what, my shift ends in an hour. If you're willing, meet me at my place. It's just past the old stone bridge, white house with a red barn. I've got a workshop out back. We can have a proper look at your Rusty without all this modern interference." He gave Lily a small, knowing smile. "And bring your grandma. She sounds like she knows a thing or two about keeping a good machine running." A flicker of hope, warm and unexpected, ignited in Lily's chest. It was a small spark, but after the cold dismissal they'd faced, it felt like a beacon. "Thank you, Mr. Jed," she whispered, relief washing over her. Grandma Rose squeezed her shoulder, her own eyes alight with a similar quiet hope. Secrets in the workshop. The crisp autumn air, far from the climate-controlled showroom, invigorated Lily as they followed Jedediah's sturdy frame around the side of the gleaming dealership. The oppressive weight of Mr. Green's condescension began to lift with each step away from the polished chrome and aggressive sales pitches. Jedediah led them to a small, unassuming building nestled behind the main service bay, a structure that seemed to have been forgotten by time and modernity. Its corrugated tin roof was speckled with rust, and a single, unadorned wooden door creaked a welcome as he pushed it open. Inside, the world transformed. The stark white of the dealership gave way to a comforting palette of grays, browns, and the occasional splash of faded red from an old toolbox. The air, thick with the earthy scent of motor oil, warm metal, and something faintly herbal like dried sage, immediately relaxed Lily's shoulders. Sunlight, filtered through a grimy window pane, illuminated motes of dust dancing in the air, creating a soft golden glow that warmed the space. Tools of every imaginable size and shape hung in orderly rows on pegboards, each one worn smooth with years of use, telling silent stories of countless repairs. A well-loved radio, tuned to a faint country station, hummed softly from a high shelf. "Make yourselves at home," Jedediah said, gesturing to a pair of mismatched but sturdy wooden chairs near a workbench cluttered with engine parts. Grandma Rose, her earlier defiance now tempered by a quiet curiosity, settled into one, her gaze sweeping the room with an approving glint. Lily, however, remained standing, her eyes drawn to a miniature Farmall engine, a perfectly rendered model, sitting prominently on the workbench. It was an uncanny replica of Rusty's heart. Jedediah, observing her fascination, offered a small, knowing smile. That there's a good starting point, isn't it? He picked up the model with surprising tenderness, his calloused fingers tracing its contours. Rusty, bless his old soul, he's got a few quirks. And sometimes the simplest solutions are the ones they don't teach in these fancy new tech schools. He placed the model engine directly in front of Lily, its tiny components intricate and precise. Now you're Rusty, he's an old-timer, built to last but with a few idiosyncrasies. You mentioned a peculiar hiccup, a moment where it just cuts out, right? Lily nodded, her throat suddenly tight. Yes, like it's lost its spark. Then after a minute or two it'll catch again, but sometimes it takes a while. It's been getting worse. Jedediah hummed, his gaze distant as if sifting through decades of mechanical memories. Classic. Had a similar case with the 58 International once. Thought it was the magneto, then the fuel line, even the points. He tapped a specific spot on the model engine, a small, almost invisible lever tucked away beneath what would be the carburetor. See this little fella here? Lily leaned closer, her anxiety momentarily forgotten, replaced by a surge of focused interest. It was barely a bump, a subtle protrusion of metal that seemed to serve no obvious function. What is it? That, Lily, Jedediah explained, his voice patient and deliberate, is the choke linkage bypass. On these older models, especially after years of vibration and wear, the internal spring can weaken. It's designed to prevent overchoking, but when it gets sticky, it can get caught in a half-open position. The engine isn't getting enough air, but it's not fully choked either. It starves itself just enough to sputter out. He carefully wiggled the tiny lever on the model engine with his thumb and forefinger. A gentle wiggle, mind you, not a yank, just enough to free it up. It resets the internal mechanism, allows the choke to fully open, and boom, Rusty breathes again. Lily stared at the tiny lever, a wave of both frustration and profound relief washing over her. So simple, so utterly hidden. She had spent hours poring over manuals, cleaning connections, checking fluids, all while this tiny overlooked component held the key. The sheer practicality of it, the quiet ingenuity of an older design, resonated deeply with her own pragmatic nature. You mean, that's it? She breathed, a flicker of hope igniting in her chest. Jedediah chuckled, a warm, rumbling sound. Sometimes that's all it takes, dear. The old ways often held the simplest truths. Modern mechanics, they'd tell you to replace the whole carburetor, maybe even the ignition system, for a problem that just needs a little nudge. He looked at her, his eyes kind. These old tractors, they're not just machines, are they? They've got character. And sometimes, character needs a little understanding, not just a whole new part. Grandma Rose, who had been listening intently, finally spoke, a soft smile gracing her lips. Sounds like you understand them, Jedediah. Sounds like you understand a lot more than just engines. The Farmall roars to life. The sun, barely a hint of gold on the horizon, found Lily already awake, a restless energy thrumming beneath her skin. Sleep had offered little solace, her mind replaying Jedediah's words, the almost absurd simplicity of his diagnosis. A little wiggle, he'd said, as if the fate of her entire growing season hinged on a child's game. But there had been an undeniable authority in his weathered eyes, a quiet confidence that resonated deeply with her own pragmatic spirit. She dressed quickly, pulling on sturdy jeans and a faded flannel shirt, the scent of morning dew already mingling with the fainter, cherished aroma of her grandmother's brewing coffee. Rose was a morning person by nature, but today, Lily suspected, her grandmother was up even earlier, sharing in her quiet anticipation. Lily bypassed the kitchen, a single-minded focus guiding her steps towards the barn. Rusty stood silhouetted against the deepening morning light, a behemoth of cast iron and faded red paint, his silent presence a testament to their shared history. He looked exactly as she'd left him yesterday, a picture of inert reliability. Yet today, there was a difference. Today, there was hope. Her heart hammered a soft rhythm against her ribs as she approached, a nervous excitement making her hands tremble slightly. This wasn't just about fixing a machine. It was about reclaiming a piece of her life, about proving that resilience wasn't just a concept, but a tangible force. She ran a hand over Rusty's cool, metallic fender, a silent promise passing between them. Jedediah had described the lever with precise, almost poetic detail. Follow the choke cable, right down to where it disappears into the engine block. A little off to the side, almost tucked away, you'll find a tiny L-shaped piece of metal. That's your bypass. It'll be stiff, Lily, might even feel stuck. She knelt beside the engine, her brow furrowed in concentration. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of hay and damp earth. She traced the thick black choke cable with her fingers, her gaze sweeping across the complex array of tubes, wires, and bolts that made up Rusty's heart. Her breath hitched when her fingers brushed against something small, cold, and undeniably L-shaped. It was almost hidden, nestled snugly beside a fuel line, just as Jedediah had described. A rush of adrenaline surged through her. This was it, the moment of truth. She gripped the tiny lever, her thumb and forefinger pressing firmly. It resisted at first, a stubborn, unyielding lump of metal. She gritted her teeth, applying a gentle, steady pressure, remembering Jedediah's warning about it being stiff. There was a faint click, almost imperceptible, and the lever yielded, shifting ever so slightly. She wiggled it again, a short, decisive movement, feeling a subtle give, a freeing of the mechanism. Rising to her feet, a wave of nervous energy washed over her. She climbed into the driver's seat, the familiar worn leather molding to her shape. Her hands, still tingling from the encounter with the tiny lever, gripped the steering wheel. She took a deep breath, the scent of oil and old metal filling her nostrils, a comforting presence. Turning the key, she heard the familiar whir of the starter motor. It engaged, a hopeful grinding sound, and then nothing. A knot tightened in her stomach. Had she done it wrong? Had Jedediah been mistaken? A moment of crushing disappointment threatened to envelop her, but she pushed it away. One more try. She turned the key again, holding it a fraction longer. The starter motor whirred, a little more insistent this time. Then, a cough. A sputtering, hesitant cough that sent a jolt of electricity through her. Another cough, stronger this time, followed by a deeper rumble. The engine caught, a rough, uneven beat at first, like a drowsy giant stretching awake. Smoke, thick and white, billowed from the exhaust pipe, carrying the sharp tang of burnt fuel. And then, with a glorious, chest-rattling roar, Rusty's engine settled into a powerful, rhythmic thrum. The vibration coursed through the seat, up into her hands, filling her with an almost overwhelming sense of triumph. The sound was a symphony, a declaration of life, of purpose, of renewed strength. It wasn't just noise, it was the voice of her farm, the heartbeat of her future. A wide, uninhibited grin split her face. She threw her head back and let out a whoop of pure, unadulterated joy, the sound echoing off the barn walls. Rusty was alive. Her beloved tractor, dismissed by the sleek modern dealership as an antique, had roared back to life with a simple wiggle and the wisdom of an old-school mechanic. The sound of his steady idle was more beautiful than any symphony, a testament to enduring spirit and the power of knowing exactly where to find the heart of the matter. A storm on the horizon. The rich, earthy aroma of freshly turned soil hung heavy in the air a few days later, mingling with the sweet scent of corn tassels drying in the late summer sun. Lily, still humming with the quiet triumph of Rusty's resurrection, had spent the intervening time catching up on field work, the rhythmic thrum of the old Farmall, a comforting counterpoint to her busy thoughts. The crops were thriving, a testament to her tireless efforts, and the fields, once a source of anxiety, now stretched out beneath the endless blue sky like a promise. That promise, however, began to fray at the edges. The local weather reports, usually a benign backdrop to daily life, grew increasingly ominous. A significant storm system churning its way inland from the coast was gathering strength, threatening to unleash its fury in a matter of days. The wind, which had been a gentle whisper, started to pick up, rustling through the leaves of the old oak by the farmhouse with a new, insistent urgency. Panic, a low-grade hum at first, began to spread through the close-knit farming community. Corn, heavy with ripe kernels, stood tall and golden in the fields, ready for harvest. But a prolonged downpour could flatten the stalks, making mechanical harvesting impossible and risking widespread blight. The race was on. From her porch, Lily watched as her neighbors, the Millers and the Davises, fired up their impressive modern combines. These machines, gargantuan beasts of steel and chrome, dwarfed Rusty with their sheer size and technological sophistication. They were the pride of the county, capable of devouring acres in a fraction of the time it took her venerable Farmall to cover a single row. The Millers, in particular, had just invested in a brand new model, a gleaming green behemoth that promised unparalleled efficiency. The first few passes were a blur of activity. The combines, with their immense headers like hungry mouths, moved swiftly across the fields, leaving trails of shorn stalks and a cloud of dust in their wake. The air vibrated with the roar of their engines, a powerful, almost aggressive sound that spoke of modern agricultural might. Lily felt a fleeting pang of something akin to envy, or perhaps simply a recognition of their superior speed. Rusty was reliable, yes, but he was undeniably slower. Then, the first hint of trouble emerged. The sky, which had been a clear, brilliant blue, began to darken at the edges, a bruised purple creeping in from the west. The air grew heavy, thick with an unspoken warning. And the ground, after a week of intermittent showers, was softer than it looked. She watched as the Miller's brand-new combine, mid-swath, suddenly lurched, its powerful engine strained, a deep groan reverberating across the distance. The enormous wheels, designed for traction, spun uselessly for a moment before biting down, but the forward momentum was lost. The combine, instead of gliding smoothly, sunk slightly, its massive weight finding a weak spot in the saturated soil. It was stuck. A collective groan, though unheard, seemed to ripple through the valley. The combine's beacon lights, usually a sign of progress, now flashed like a distress signal. Mr. Miller, a burly man with a perpetually worried expression, climbed down from the cab, his movements stiff with frustration. He prodded the mud around the tires with his boot, his shoulders slumping. Moments later, the Davises' equally impressive machine encountered a similar fate. A notoriously low-lying section of their field, usually dry by this time of year, had become a treacherous bog. The combine's powerful engine roared, attempting to muscle its way through, but the massive tires churned helplessly, throwing up clods of thick black mud. The machine listed precariously, its header tilting towards the earth as if bowing in defeat. The sound of straining engines and spinning tires replaced the earlier confident hum of progress. Farmers who had been focused solely on the impending storm now faced a new, immediate crisis. The combines, symbols of efficiency and power, were now immobile monuments to the unpredictable nature of the land. Lily felt a strange mix of emotions. There was no joy in her neighbor's misfortune, only a deep-seated understanding of their predicament. Every farmer knew the heartbreak of losing a harvest, but there was also a quiet confidence blooming within her. Rusty, for all his age, was light, he was agile, and he had just proven his unwavering reliability. As the first fat drops of rain began to speckle the dusty lane, carried on a gust of wind that promised worse to come, Lily knew a storm was indeed on the horizon, not just in the sky, but in the unfolding drama of the fields. And suddenly, her little old tractor didn't feel so small anymore. The little tractor that could. The rumble of Rusty's engine, usually a comforting rhythm, now felt like a battle drum as Lily steered him towards the chaos in Miller's North 40. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and diesel, punctuated by the frustrated shouts of farmers. From a distance, the scene resembled a graveyard of giants, massive combines, their multi-ton frames sunk deep into the saturated soil, sat like beached whales, their bright paint dulled by the clinging mud. The sun, a watery disk behind the swirling clouds, cast a sickly pallor over the unfolding drama. Lily had spent the morning catching up on her own fields, the gentle chug of Rusty's engine a balm to her soul after the harrowing week. She'd watched, a knot forming in her stomach, as the first combines had attempted to navigate the unexpectedly soft ground, only to bog down with a disheartening squelch. Now, the fields were a testament to their folly, a landscape of immobilized, expensive machinery. Yet, as she approached, a quiet hum of confidence began to resonate within her. Rusty, light on his feet despite his age, had handled her own muddy patches with ease. She pulled Rusty to a halt at the edge of the Miller field, the smaller tractor looking almost comically out of place next to the hulking green and yellow machines. A few heads turned, then more, as the sight of her bright red Farmall, a relic among the modern titans, registered with the assembled farmers. A mix of curiosity and thinly veiled skepticism crossed their faces. Lily felt a familiar prickle of defiance, the same feeling that had propelled her through the condescending dealership just days ago. Jedediah, grease still smudged on his weathered cheek from an earlier attempt to free a combine with a more powerful, equally stuck tractor, spotted her. He gave a small, encouraging nod, a silent acknowledgement of the plan they'd discussed. "Lily," he called, his voice raspy, "you really think that little fella can do it?" Lily dismounted, her boots sinking slightly into the mud. "He's light, Jedediah," she said, her voice steady. "And he's got heart." She walked past a gleaming John Deere S79. Oh, its tracks churned deep into the mire, its operator staring blankly at the dash. The sheer weight of these machines, designed for speed and capacity on dry land, was now their undoing. They were too heavy, too powerful, too unwieldy for the treacherous conditions. She unspooled a heavy-duty tow chain from Rusty's rear hitch, the metal clanking against the tractor's frame. The other farmers watched, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and desperation. No one offered to help, yet no one actively hindered her either. She could feel their collective eyes on her, a silent judgment hanging in the air. Lily approached the nearest stuck combine, a Case IH, its bright red chassis caked in mud. The farmer, a burly man named Gus, ran a hand through his thinning hair, his face etched with worry. "Lily, what are you—" "We're going to get you out, Gus," she interrupted, her tone leaving no room for argument. She expertly threaded the chain around the combine's reinforced tow point, her movements practiced and efficient. The chain felt cold and heavy in her hands, a tangible link between the past and the present. Back on Rusty, she engaged the PTO, the engine revving slightly. The little tractor, usually so docile, now vibrated with a contained power. She gently eased the clutch, felt the chain tighten, and then, with a slow, deliberate pull, Rusty began to move. The Farmall's tires, narrower and with a deeper tread than the combine's, found purchase in the soft earth, churning just enough to propel them forward without digging in. A gasp went through the small crowd as the Case IH, with a groan of metal and a sucking sound of released mud, began to inch backward. Rusty, head down, pulled with an unwavering determination that belied his size. Slowly, painstakingly, the massive combine was dragged free, its tracks leaving deep furrows in the mud, but free nonetheless. A cheer erupted, tentative at first, then growing in volume. Gus, his face streaked with dirt and relief, hurried over to Rusty. I don't believe it, Lily. Thank you. How did he do that?" Lily just smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "He's a good old boy," she said, patting Rusty's fender, "and he knows these fields." One after another, Lily and Rusty worked their way through the field. A John Deere, then another Case 1H, then a smaller New Holland. Each behemoth yielded to the persistent, unassuming strength of the Farmall. The process was slow, agonizingly so, compared to the lightning-fast harvesting these combines were capable of, but it was effective. Each successful tow-out was met with renewed cheers, a growing sense of awe replacing the initial skepticism. The sun, now lower in the sky, cast long, distorted shadows of the freed combines, making them seem even more enormous next to Lily's nimble tractor. The other farmers, initially passive observers, now sprang into action, helping to guide the combines once they were on firmer ground, offering Lily water, even cheering Rusty on. The air, once heavy with despair, now crackled with a renewed sense of purpose, a shared effort blossoming in the face of the encroaching storm. The little red tractor, once dismissed as obsolete, had become the unlikely hero, a beacon of resilient ingenuity in a field of stranded giants. Lily, covered in mud and sweat, felt a deep, quiet satisfaction settle over her. She and Rusty, the team that had almost given up, were now saving the harvest, one slow, steady pull at a time. The storm clouds continued to gather, but for now, the community had found its anchor in the most unexpected place. Mr. Green's surprise. The late afternoon sun, now a watery gold, cast long shadows across Miller's North 40. It illuminated the mired giants of the field, hulking green and yellow combines, their massive tires buried deep in the sucking mud, looking less like powerful machines and more like beached whales. But amidst the scene of agricultural desolation, a rhythmic thrumming had begun to assert itself, a steady beat of defiance against the bogged-down despair. Mr. Green, en route to another prospective sale, found his progress impeded by a gathering of vehicles at the edge of the field. A frown creased his brow. Delays were anathema to his meticulously planned schedule. He pulled his gleaming black SUV to a stop behind a dusty pickup, its occupants, an elderly farmer and his wife, craning their necks towards the action. He scoffed, ready to dismiss whatever rural spectacle had halted traffic. Then he saw it. A bright red blur, impossibly nimble, weaving between the stranded combines. Not one of his dealership's modern marvels, but an antique, a Farmall of all things. His eyes narrowed, straining to identify the driver. The distinct outline of a young woman, her braid swaying with the movement of the tractor, was unmistakable. Lily. Disbelief warred with a rising tide of irritation. He remembered her, the girl with the outdated machinery, the one he'd subtly, perhaps not so subtly, dismissed. She was just a farm girl, asking about obsolete parts. And now she was, what exactly? Playing in the mud? He watched, mesmerized despite himself, as the little red tractor, Rusty, hitched itself to the rear of the closest combine, its engine a surprisingly robust growl. The driver, Lily, expertly engaged the PTO, and with a series of powerful controlled jerks, the smaller machine began to pull. Mr. Green expected to see the Farmall's tires spin uselessly, or worse, for the old frame to buckle under the strain. Instead, Rusty's deep-cut treads found purchase, churning through the muck with a surprising, almost defiant grip. Slowly, agonizingly slowly at first, then with increasing momentum, the multi-ton combine began to move. Mud splattered, thick and viscous, but the Farmall held its ground. A collective gasp rippled through the small crowd that had gathered, followed by a cheer that swelled into a genuine roar as the combine, with a final sucking lurch, pulled free of its muddy prison. Lily, with a triumphant wave, disengaged Rusty and artfully maneuvered it toward the next trapped behemoth. Mr. Green felt a peculiar sensation in his stomach, a mixture of bewilderment and something akin to shame. He'd told her, hadn't he, that her tractor was a relic, that it was time to upgrade, that his state-of-the-art machines were the only answer to modern farming's challenges. Yet, here was his answer, stuck in the mud, being rescued by a machine that predated most of his inventory. He watched her work, the young woman he'd so easily dismissed. She moved with an innate confidence, her hands steady on the wheel, her posture radiating competence. She didn't struggle. She worked. There was no flustered panic, no frantic adjustments, just smooth, practiced movements, born of a deep understanding of her machine and the land it worked. Each time Rusty pulled another combine free, a fresh wave of cheers erupted from the farmers, men whose fields were being saved, whose livelihoods had just been salvaged from the brink of ruin. The sight of their relief, their gratitude, directed not at a shiny new dealership machine, but at Lily and her venerable Farmall, pricked at Mr. Green's conscience. He saw the respect in their eyes, the dawning realization of what true resilience looked like. His own words, uttered with such certainty in the sterile environment of his showroom, echoed back to him, hollow and insincere. "You need power, efficiency, advanced hydraulics," he'd lectured, oblivious to the power of simpler things. As the last combine was successfully extracted, Lily parked Rusty to the side, wiping her brow with the back of a gloved hand. She was mud-splattered, hair askew, but her smile was radiant, utterly genuine. The farmers converged on her, clapping her on the back, shaking her hand, their voices a grateful murmur. She was no longer just a farm girl. She was their hero. Mr. Green watched the impromptu celebration, a knot tightening in his chest. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, casting a warm glow over the scene of salvaged harvest. He saw the genuine connections, the community rallying around an unexpected solution. He saw everything he had overlooked, everything he had dismissed, and for the first time in a long time, Mr. Green felt not the prickle of irritation, but a profound and unsettling sense of humility. He had been wrong, terribly, unequivocally wrong. a true farmer's respect. The wind, a harbinger of the approaching tempest, began its mournful song across the fields, rustling the remaining cornstalks with an urgent whisper. Dark, bruised clouds rolled in from the west, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and angry gray. But as the first fat drops of rain splattered against the dusty ground, a different kind of sound filled the air, the whirring of grain augers and the steady rumble of engines not stuck in the mud, but triumphantly harvesting. Thanks to Lily and Rusty, the vast majority of the corn, once threatened by the sudden downpour, was now safely in storage. The once mired combines, now free and efficient, had worked with renewed vigor, their operators spurred on by the earlier near disaster and Lily's unexpected intervention. The relief among the farming community was palpable, a quiet hum beneath the rising storm. Farmers, drenched but smiling, exchanged nods of gratitude and respect in Lily's direction as they secured their equipment. Lily, her own face smudged with grease and mud, stood beside Rusty, wiping down the tractor's grimy hood with a worn rag. The antique Farmall, though caked in the thick clinging mud of its recent heroic endeavors, exuded an air of quiet dignity, its red paint gleaming faintly beneath the gloom. Her heart swelled with a quiet pride that had nothing to do with ego and everything to do with purpose. She had always trusted Rusty, always known its capabilities, even when others hadn't. A shadow fell over her, and she looked up to see Mr. Green approaching, his usual crisp dealer's shirt now clinging damply to his frame. His expression was no longer one of dismissive superiority or even the stunned disbelief from earlier. Instead, a profound humility etched lines around his eyes. He carried himself differently, too, the confident stride replaced by a more hesitant, almost deferential gait. He stopped a few feet from her, his gaze sweeping over Rusty, then settling on Lily. He took a deep breath, the scent of damp earth and coming rain filling the air between them. "Lily," he began, his voice rougher than she remembered, stripped of its practiced sales polish. I owe you an apology." Lily simply watched him, her hand resting lightly on Rusty's fender. The wind whipped a strand of hair across her face, and she didn't bother to push it back. "I judged you unfairly," he continued, his eyes earnest. "I saw an old tractor, and I saw a young woman. I saw what I thought was outdated and inefficient. I dismissed you. I dismissed your equipment. I dismissed your understanding of what it takes to farm, really farm, in this county." He paused, swallowing hard. "And I was wrong. So profoundly, shamefully wrong." The words hung in the air, heavy with his sincerity. The wind howled a little louder, as if to underscore the weight of his confession. "You didn't just save those combines, Lily," he went on, gesturing vaguely towards the now secured machinery. "You saved a lot of livelihoods today. You saved a lot of worry. You showed us all what true grit looks like. And that machine right there," he pointed to Rusty, a newfound reverence in his tone, "is no relic. It's a mighty, mighty machine. A testament to engineering, sure. But more than that, a testament to what capable hands can achieve with the right tools, no matter their age." He stepped closer, extending a hand, not for a handshake, but as if to offer a silent apology. "You, Lily," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "are a true farmer, the kind we all need to be. And I have learned a valuable lesson today." Lily met his gaze, her expression unreadable for a long moment. The storm was now fully upon them, rain lashing down, but neither of them seemed to notice. She saw the genuine regret in his eyes, the stripped bare honesty. It wasn't just the words, it was the way he stood, the way his shoulders seemed to sag with the weight of his revelation. Finally, a slow, quiet smile spread across Lily's lips. It wasn't a triumphant smirk, nor was it a forgiving beam. It was the smile of someone who had always known her worth and the worth of her loyal companion, Rusty, and had simply waited for others to catch up. A quiet, confident smile, warmed by the understanding that true recognition had finally arrived, not through boasting, but through undeniable action. She didn't need to say anything. The steady thrum of the rain, the secured harvest, and the humbled salesman before her spoke volumes.